Virginia Tech with back-to-back wins with a backup quarterback in place play their last non-conference game, tuning up for ACC play. We bring in Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC to help us break down the Hokies taking on East Carolina, which seems like a light touch, but of course the Pirates went to Blacksburg last year and pulled off the upset. So, of course, thanks so much for joining us, Mike. Let's look at Michael Brewer, of course, injured against Ohio State. In steps Brenden Motley, a much different style quarterback. The junior, though, I'm looking at the numbers. Pretty consistent efforts the last 2 weeks against Furman and Purdue.
Yeah, over 450 yards. He's completed about 64% of his passes over the last couple of weeks, and he's had very similar numbers from game to game. Obviously, 2 weeks ago, Furman in Motley's first career start. That's a nice game to, get your footing when you're playing an FCS school, and Tech blew him out 42-3. Motley was impressive, 16 of 24 for 233 yards and a couple touchdown passes. Also had 38 yards rushing and a touchdown on the ground. So if he was able to do that for the rest of the season, the coaching staff would be extremely happy with him. And then you look at the Purdue game last week, he posted similar numbers, 15 of 24, so just one less completion for 220 yards and 2 touchdowns through a long 61-yard touchdown pass in that one. Once again, had another rushing touchdown on the ground. So he's accounted for 6 touchdowns in his first 2 starts for the Hokies, and he's played about as well as you could expect a backup to play, given the tough situation that the Hokies are in with all their injuries.
Yeah, anytime you throw in an inexperienced quarterback and he throws 48 passes over the course of 2 games, regardless of the opponent, and 0 picks, that's the primary number to look at. And again, he's been consistent. He's been efficient. I'm a bit surprised that he hasn't rushed based on his reputation, rushed more successfully with pretty pedestrian numbers there. He does have the 2 rushing touchdowns that you mentioned. Purdue's bad for a Power 5 team. We both know that, but they actually have improved over their play of recent years, and it was a pretty good game for about a half before the Hokies blew them out in the second half. Mike, I would have to say that I'm a bit surprised because J.C. Coleman was the guy that really impressed me down the stretch, really took over the rushing chores for the Hokies. But actually, Virginia Tech right now with 3 backs over 100 yards, so they're splitting things up in the backfield.
Yeah, they are. And Trayvon Mcmillan out of Woodbridge, Virginia, so right near my hometown. Got to give him a little bit of shout out there. He's been impressive, and he was kind of a home run threat throughout spring ball. And I know, Shane Beamer, the running backs coach, Frank's son, was real excited about the way he was performing in camp. And he hasn't disappointed, 179 yards through the first 3 games. Obviously a shared role, but he's averaging 8.5 yards per carry. So he's kind of the home run threat they've been looking for. He gets up, gets his yards in chunks, and he's a guy out of the backfield that Tech's looking to utilize more and more as they get deeper into the season. As far as the rest of the running backs go, Trey Edmonds, 29 carries on the season for 136 yards and a touchdown. J.C. Coleman, 25 carries for 104 yards and a touchdown. So they're breaking up the load pretty evenly, and now that you have Brenden Motley in a quarterback, he's carried the ball 26 times through 3 games. So what you're seeing here for the Hokies is a real balanced rushing attack. They're using a lot of different guys, and I really like the way that they're spreading the ball around, and they're getting a lot of guys, acclimated with the offense.
It appears as though Bucky Hodges is probably going to suffer more than anybody else from this Michael Brewer injury. One of the best tight ends from a pass-catching standpoint in all of college football, coming off a big freshman campaign. 5 catches through 3 games, 59 yards, 2 touchdowns. So this is one of the more efficient 3-catch, 11-yard games I've ever seen if you look at the Purdue numbers, because he did score twice with the 3 receptions for 11 yards. But Bucky Hodges' numbers are down based on what we expected to see, like a 50-catch season at this point. Isaiah Ford, obviously the big play guy at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, so with Bucky Hodges, it's no secret anymore. He's a big-time player. He's dynamic, a big 6'4" body. Came into Virginia Tech as a quarterback, actually, and was kind of in the mold of a Logan Thomas, and they weren't sure how they were going to work him in with the amount of quarterbacks they had on the roster at that time. He ended up redshirting his freshman year, and then coming in last year as a redshirt freshman, put up great numbers for the Hokies. And now what you're seeing this year with Brewer getting hurt, in Ohio State game planning for Bucky, he had such a big game against the Buckeyes a year ago. With Ohio State game planning for him, he wasn't able to pull in any catches in that game. And now over the last 2 weeks, like you said, he does have, I believe it's 3 touchdowns, or 2 touchdowns on the season, but only has 5 catches. And what you're seeing now is with Brewer out of the lineup, he's suffering, and a lot of the receivers are suffering in that regard. Isaiah Ford does have 266 yards and 3 touchdowns on the year, but outside of him, they've had a lot of trouble finding a third receiver that's really going to be effective moving forward for him. Cam Phillips, who's a true sophomore, along with Isaiah Ford, is second on the team in receptions with 10 for 116 yards on the season. But those are the 2 primary receivers, other than Bucky Hodges, who obviously plays tight end. So what the Hokies are doing right now is they're looking for a guy at the receiver position that's a true wide receiver that can stretch the field, and they've been unable to find that to this point in the season. But they do have a bunch of dynamic tight ends, from Ryan Malik to Bucky, as we've spoken about here, and as well as Calvin Klein, who had a really big freshman year 2 years ago and was out for most of last year with injuries. So they got some playmakers there at the receiver position, but they're still trying to find their footing.
Mike, I think we'll really need to dive into ACC play before we know a ton about this defense. We expected it to be a top 20 national defense because of the defensive line. The ends can rush. The 2 corners are great potentially in Fuller and Faison. The Ohio State game I would consider a bit of an aberration because they really slowed down the Buckeyes in the second and third quarters. Ohio State's a different breed. If they've got it all working, they scored 59 against Wisconsin last year. They scored 42 against Alabama. So that can be a bit of a pass, but it was almost 600 yards for the Buckeyes in that game. But the last 2 weeks, they've clamped down on the teams you would expect them to. Now, going into ACC play, we'll see what this defense is really made of, and you would expect this is going to be the units that's going to carry them if they're going to contend with the likes of Miami and Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that. As we saw in the first game of the season, Kendall Fuller got exposed a little bit on the outside, did not play his best game. He's a very good player for the Hokies, but he struggled here in the early going, and he's found his footing a bit more here over the last couple of weeks. But, you know, Tech is used to being a top 15, top 20 defense, and thus far this season they've struggled to put up those same type of numbers. Right now they're sitting in a position where they're 62nd in total defense, and they've only really played one real opponent here to date with Ohio State. Furman and Purdue, neither of them are really offensively efficient, especially Furman for obvious reasons. And Purdue's a bottom feeder in the Big Ten. But Tech right now, they're giving up 5.83 yards per play, and that's not a staple of the Bud Foster defense that we've come to know and realize, you know, over the last 10 or 15 years that he's been able to run that defense to a T in Blacksburg. And so far this season, they've given up 9 touchdowns and almost 364 yards per game. So, like you said, a lot of defensive aspirations entering the season for the Hokies, but we really won't know what kind of defense they are until they get into the brunt of their ACC schedule. Right now, I'm not extremely encouraged by the way they've played so far. It's kind of been they were advertised as being this, you know, this really good defense that a lot of teams were going to have issues throwing against, especially because of Fuller and Faison, like you said before. And their rushing defense has been pretty solid, besides a few aberrations over the last couple seasons. But thus far over the first 3 games, they have not played up to their ability, and they're a much better defense than they've showed. So I think what you're looking at now, you're seeing Adonis Alexander at safety. He took the place of Desmond Fry and Donovan Riley, who were both playing in the rover position. And you're seeing a couple of other freshmen in the game. Anthony Shagog's played a bit as well at whip. And you're seeing Greg Stroman, who's played a little bit in the nickel. He's a true sophomore. So what you're seeing is a lot of young guys rotating in the safety positions and trying to supplement Fuller and Faison a little bit because they've struggled in the early going to keep their receivers locked down on the corners.
Okay, Mike, so East Carolina's next. We know that the Pirates traditionally give ACC teams all sorts of fits, including a Virginia Tech coming off the Ohio State win last year, but East Carolina, a bit of a different team this year without Shane Carden at quarterback. Justin Hardy, I believe, is on an NFL roster who was really a dynamic receiver for them last season as well. But they still love to throw it around. Blake Kemp threw it 49 times against Navy, but they're coming off back-to-back losses. I would think for East Carolina, the Florida loss a bit encouraging because even though that's a mediocre marginal SEC team, it's an elite defense, and they put up 24 points against Florida. Then somewhat inexplicably, Navy just runs right over them 45-21 and rushed for a Navy-like 415 yards. So what do we know about the Pirates at this point?
Well, like you said, Florida has an elite defense. They're improved under Jim McElwain, and they will be much better in the years to come. So it is an encouraging loss if there was such a thing for East Carolina. But I don't think the Navy game was that big of a surprise. If you just think back to the East Carolina-Virginia Tech game last year, Tech came off that huge upset at Ohio State. They were 2-0 entering the game. Lane Stadium was rocking, and they were coming home for the first time since beating the number 8th ranked Buckeyes last season. And what you saw there in Blacksburg was Shane Carden had his way early in the game. They jumped out to a quick 4-touchdown lead. It was 28-0 there in the first half. But what you saw from Virginia Tech is the longer the East Carolina's defense was on the field, Tech started chipping away at that lead a little bit. And you saw East Carolina surrender that 4-touchdown lead that they had earlier in the game. Tech came all the way back to tie it. East Carolina ultimately went on a 2-minute drive and won the game. Shane Carden, with his experience, made one more play than the Tech defense was able to at the end of the game. But we know that that defense at East Carolina is mediocre at best, and they're prone to give up a lot of big plays. So that in itself is not a huge surprise. As far as the offense is concerned, we know what we're expecting. They're going to throw the football a ton under Ruff and McNeil. That's no secret. Blake Kemp came into the season not expecting to be the starter. Then he comes into camp. There's an injury in front of him. He steps into the role as a starting quarterback. He's thrown for 893 yards over the first 3 games, 6 touchdowns, so only 2 picks, has a 135.6 passer rating, and has completed 71% of his passes. You've got Isaiah Jones on the outside. He's got 342 yards receiving, and he already has 30 catches on the season. That's 10 catches a game. I mean, just think of how many catches he'll have at the end of the season if he continues that rate. He only has 1 touchdown, but he's their big play guy. He stretches the field, and he has elite speed at the receiver position. At running back, they have Chris Hairston, 45 carries for 207 yards on the year and 4 touchdowns. His longest run is a 45-yard touchdown run. He's got great speed as well to complement that passing game, that air raid pass attack that they have. So East Carolina's no pushover. They never are for Virginia Tech, but I think this year more than any, Virginia Tech should be equipped to handle that air raid attack, assuming that their defense plays up to their capability. And East Carolina is taking a step back, without Shane Carden. And we've seen that over the first 3 games. They're already in a 1-2 hole, and they're at home this weekend. But Virginia Tech's got a little bit of swagger back after that 51-point win. That 51 points they scored last week against Purdue. And winning that game on the road. So it's not going to be an easy game for East Carolina.
Hey, Mike, your prognostication on Virginia Tech. I had the Hokies winning the Coastal Division. I just thought with the defense that they play, a veteran quarterback coming back, of course, he's missing time now, and with Louisville and North Carolina State being the 2 teams that they would face out of the other division, thought it was wide open for the Hokies to overtake Georgia Tech and Miami. What was your thoughts preseason on Virginia Tech, and have they changed at all?
Well, preseason, I thought Virginia Tech was the favorite to win the Coastal, and the reason I thought that was because I thought that, I assumed Brewer would be healthy at quarterback, and I thought that it would come down to that Georgia Tech game, that head-to-head matchup to determine who would win the Coastal Division. Also coming into the season, as far as the Coastal Division was concerned, I wasn't sold on the Hurricanes of Miami, and I'm still not sold on them after how they almost lost that game to Nebraska last week. I think they got a great quarterback in Brad Kaya, but I'm just not sold on that defense, and I think Al Golden doesn't really know what he's doing, in all honesty. He's proved time and time again he can recruit, but he hasn't really turned those recruits into real elite talent at the ACC level that we have come accustomed to from the other teams in the conference. So I thought Virginia Tech had a great chance to win the Coastal. I still think that with the way that Brenden Motley has played over the last couple of weeks, if you would ask me right after the the Ohio State game to start the season, I would have told you, Georgia Tech. I still think Georgia Tech has a slight edge over the Hokies at this point in time, just because with Motley's ability to pass the ball, I still want to see more of that. I think he's a very good runner. He's been able to throw the ball well over the last 2 weeks. If he can sustain that same momentum heading throughout the rest of the season, especially into the middle of ACC play as we get later into October and early November, if he's still playing well up until the time Michael Brewer returns, I'll be buying the Hokies once again to win the Coastal. But after what I saw from Georgia Tech last weekend against Notre Dame, the way they fought back in that game to make it competitive late, I still like Georgia Tech's rushing attack at the end of the day to beat the Hokies without a healthy Michael Brewer. But we'll just have to see what happens. It's a long season, and a lot of these teams in the ACC have yet to get into their conference schedule. So we'll just have to see how it turns out.
All right, Virginia Tech, a pretty substantial favorite to get it done against East Carolina this week and move into ACC play at 3-1. Mike McDaniel joining us from inside the ACC. Appreciate it, Mike.
Thanks, Mark.